I am Stephanie Wolfson, and I am here to show you how you can make it your way. And I might have just dated myself, but for those of you that remember some to be unnamed fast food companies that made some fun commercials back in the day, yes, we will be talking about food today. Okay, just kidding. It is CET, but I'm using hamburgers as a really fun way to help us describe things. So, our food prep or agenda for the day is a really quick who am I? Getting hangry, which is why you should use templates. And the meat of my pun intended presentation is going to be about taking orders, which is really kind of our considerations, things to think about and questions to ask when before you even start making a template, and also creating your recipes, creating your templates. And then we'll get into a really quick make it our way, where we look at a few examples with some Q&A at the end. So who am I? I am currently the design department manager at Hat Collective. I have only been there for about 6 months now, though. But I was previously at dealerships working as a dealer designer for over 11 years. And then prior to that, I also have a few years of experience on the A&D side. I am a Texas native, but I've lived kind of all over the country, well, at least like Texas and East. And I'm currently outside of Philadelphia, but some really quick, I guess, what I think are fun things to know about me. Thanks to COVID, I have a newfound love of paint by numbers, which I was able to marry with my household's love of Star Wars. In fact, I have 4 paint by number Star Wars in my dining room wall. Okay, clutter really gives me anxiety. So I'll just lay that out there right now. And if you don't know me already, then you probably don't know that I wear pretty much a uniform because decision making takes a lot of brain effort, and I want as few decision making things in my day as possible. So I wear a lot of black and jeans, and if it's not jeans, then it's more black. So there you go. I also really love to read. In my insomnia in the middle of the night, I have my Kindle right there next to me. But more on why we're actually here today. And okay, I'll stop you right now. If you haven't eaten, maybe go ahead and pause the recording, go grab a snack or maybe an entire meal, because yeah, we're gonna have a lot of pictures of food, specifically hamburgers. So hope you enjoy hamburgers. Or if you're like me, vegetarian, maybe go grab a veggie burger. But when you're getting hangry, what do you want to be able to do? You want to be able to get something really fast and in your stomach for that instant gratification. So, for very similar reasons, this is also why we use templates, or why I strongly recommend you use a template. Because when you walk into a nice, clean kitchen and you even already have all of your ingredients all prepped and ready to go, we're talking about that mise en place idea, right? You're using the same ingredients over and over and over again, but maybe with some, slight differences here and there, omitting an ingredient in this order, adding some extra in this other order, and you can kind of think of those orders as our project requests. So let's get all of our drawing tools all prepped and ready to go so that when you get those project requests coming in, you can just hop right on into your drawing and specification. That part of our job is that we love the most, right? So what do we do when we start taking those orders? Well, we're going to ask a lot of questions. And one of the very first questions that I always recommend is to think about who is the client. And when I say client here, I'm actually talking about the end user of the deliverables that you're creating out of CET. Because as designers, our clients, and I use that in quotes, can be actually internal coworkers, right? It can be our salespeople, it can be our project managers and our installers, but it can also be the client, the end user, who is going to be purchasing and using the furniture that we're specifying. So when we're looking at that or thinking about that, let's look at what's needed for order placement? What is needed for portraying design intent? What is even the client's we'll say grade level of furniture? Do they know how to read a two-dimensional plan? Do they know what a pedestal is when we say that word? Are they thinking storage, or are they thinking that thing that statues go on in museums? So keeping that in mind might also help you figure out kind of the best way to think about setting up your templates and having them set up for success. Now, another thing to take into consideration is how many templates do you actually need? Do you have a whole bunch of different clients with different needs from each other? Or maybe you have kind of a bulk of your projects are, you can set it up in one single way, but you have one client that's like just way off the wall there with all of their separate needs and wants and desires that they need for their own internal process. And so you have to set up a whole completely different thing. Do you need multiple templates is really what I'm getting at. Can you use one for all of your projects, or do you need more than one? But here's where I can give you a time saver tip. I always recommend, if you're going to do multiple templates, spend the bulk of your time on one template first. Fine tune it. Ask all of those questions. Figure out what all the needs are, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in the next slide here. But think about all of the different things that you need and spend as much time as you need on that first template, and then duplicate and start making all of your adjustments for that special client or that special project type, whatever the reasons might be for having multiple templates. It's much easier to do it that way than trying to remember, okay, I made this change over here and I need to make it the same change on these other 5 templates that I have started. Which templates did I make it on? I can't remember now. Let's just cut all of that out. Work on one at a time and really fine tune that first one. Now, some additional questions that I always like to ask. What information needs to be included from an internal dealership process? What quote numbers or project numbers do you need to have, and on which pages? Is it something that repeats on every single page, or maybe half the pages? Do you put client name, maybe even a specific contact name, dates, revision information, logos? Do you have like terms and conditions or notes, like things like that? But also, who will be using the template? So I'm pretty sure that you, my audience right now, are most likely a dealer designer. But I also know that there are some dealerships out there that let salespeople use CET, or maybe even have hybrid roles of sales and design in one person, or designers and project managers in one position. But also, I, as a template creator, never also want to assume that the way that I work is how everyone works. So even talk to your fellow designers. What will make their lives easier? The way that you do something may not be the way that everyone else does it, and the way that someone else does it might even make more sense for everyone to follow. You never know. You might get some really great ideas out of those conversations as well. Now, you've started asking questions, and I say starting. I am the question girl, self-appointed here. But when you're actually ready to sit down and start, where do you start? I always suggest working backwards. Start with your paper views and continue to ask a ton of questions. So let's dive into those paper views. What information is going to be showing up over and over and over again? I already gave some examples. Maybe you want a date on every page. Maybe you need a project number on every page. Whatever it might be, use your data fields for those. Because, and this is where I love my data fields. I hate having to type in the exact same information on page after page of stuff. And this is one of the reasons why I actually really like doing my deliverables in CET and not something like PowerPoint. PowerPoint doesn't have these data field tools that CET does, or at least not in the same capacity. And so it makes it a lot easier. I can put in that client name one time and it populates on every single page, every single location that I need it to. And if I accidentally misspell something, I also only have to correct it that one time. But also consider creating some reusable data fields. And there's a lot of manufacturers out there that have the project information files, including the CET core. So you can also create multiple project information files. Maybe you want to create one for each designer. Maybe you want to create one for clients or by salesperson. There's a lot of different possibilities. But here's another question to ask yourself though. If you end up creating a whole bunch of project information files to be applied to each template, would it actually then be something, maybe that's where you start looking at to, is it better to have multiple project information files? Or is it better to start considering multiple templates if you only have one? Now, continuing on with our paper spaces, let's look at plan views. So you place a view clip. Yeah, go ahead and place a view clip. It doesn't matter if it's empty, it's a placeholder. It helps you create the rest of the layout of your paper views. But you can also go ahead and put some add-ons on there. If you always want it black and white, add the black and white. If you need it at a certain scale, then go ahead and apply that scale. And it's one less thing that every user has to do whenever they start to apply their specific project information within all of the plan views. Now, another thing to consider though, and this is where we get into reusable files. I love my reusable files because I use them for myself all the time. And if I'm using them for myself all the time, then I'm going to assume it would be helpful for other people to access as well. So why not have them on the network? So go ahead and create some of those add-on templates in Paperspace. And then you can also save those add-on templates, share them with your coworkers, and then very quickly and easily apply things to maybe there's a very specific layout that you need to have a different add-on template to, or maybe you're working with an old drawing. So using those and keeping those in there is very helpful. But this is also where we start looking at that thing that we all hate to talk about, visibility settings. So here's my recommendation for visibility settings. And yes, I actually did this. Visibility settings in my book is one of those, you just gotta like test it out. So bring in a whole bunch of typicals or favorites or what have you from a whole bunch of different vendors that you typically use, put them into your drawing, and then figure out your visibility settings. And once you have those visibility settings set that work, 90% of the time, then save them. Go ahead and even apply them to your view clips here within your template, because all of these things will stick in your template and then you don't have to apply it again. But then again, if it works 90% of the time, share those with your colleagues, because as we all know, figuring out those visibility settings is not just a pain in the butt, it's very time consuming. So if we only have to do that for 10% of the time, then let's only do it 10% of the time. All right, graphics. If you are lucky enough to have a graphic designer on your marketing staff, or maybe even a fellow designer that just really loves graphic design, use them. Let's go ahead and set up all of these paper views so that they look beautiful and are legible. And, again, thinking back to those, grade levels for the clients trying to read everything, make sure that all of the layouts align with those grade levels. But also think about, how do you work and how do your coworkers work? I personally love to use PhotoLab because I know that as soon as I update a rendering, it's also going to update if I already have it placed in my paper view. But I know that some coworkers really like to use the saved images from the PhotoLab and insert them as JPEGs. Do you also need to have article views? Because did you know you can set up some article views and have it save as part of your template? But consider all of the sizing and placement of things too. This goes into that graphic, do you have headers and footers? Do you have things that can be maneuvered around depending on like the size of the plan, the size of the renderings, things like that? So how flexible do you want your pay-per-views to be and still maintain consistency across users within your dealership? So if there are things like headers and footers that maybe you want to have fixed and not really allow people to change too much, then go ahead and lock those down. Don't let people change them if you don't want to. But if you're going to do that, here's your time saver tip coming from someone with a really long name. Set up those fields for the very longest entry that you can think of. Find the designer with the longest name, or the client with the longest name, or the project name with the longest name. Like set all of those fields up for that longest entry. Your quote numbers. If you have a 5-digit quote number, don't use all ones, use all zeros to help you with your placement. And then you don't have people, again, like me, who open up the template and then on every single project have to adjust the length of the name so that my full name shows up and isn't cut off and saying Wolf's. Yeah, it gets really annoying, I gotta say. But another idea, if you're going to use those data fields, half the time, well, maybe not half the time, but there's always a few data fields that like you're like, well, that's not something that really matches quite right with what we're using it for, so I'm just going to use this other field. So go ahead and include prompts for where you want things to go. Also, it doesn't necessarily have to be a data field. It can be just a regular text field that you're using for maybe like a subheader on a page, but maybe you want that to be in all caps. You can include that in the prompt. Hey, subheader, all caps, right here. Again, helping to create the consistency across all the users within your dealership. Now, which pay-per-views should live in the template file versus being uploaded per project? So yeah, do you want it to be readily available with the cookies where everyone can pick up their own, or do you want it inside the cookie jar where it takes a lot more effort? If there are pages or sheets that you always include in every single deliverable, by all means, let those live inside the template. But for those pay-per-views that change, maybe it's use this particular one for large projects, or this one is only for installation drawings and you don't input it until you know that a project is ordered. Stuff like that, go ahead and have those live outside the drawing and save that file size and then import as needed. But here's one of my big tips though, is save all of your pay-per-views as reusable files, even the ones that live inside your template. Because once you start using that template, I almost promise you that when you open up an old drawing that did not start with that template, you're gonna find yourself wanting to just import all the new pay-per-views because they're just gonna be that much easier to start with. But also, before you save, here's my time saver tip. Name your pay-per-views. So you don't have page 1, page 2, page 3, just like it's really difficult to have photo 1, photo 2, photo 3 in Photolab and not be able to remember which one has the private office versus the close-up of the task chair versus, whatever. Go ahead and name your pay-per-views, and then actually it helps save you time whenever you're saving them as your reusable files too. So we're gonna jump over here to drawing mode now. I'm gonna guess that 90 to 94% of the time, we're all using AutoCAD files in our CET drawings. So add a 0 point, just let that live in the template file. But here's my pro tip on that. When you're cleaning up your AutoCAD files, go ahead and move the entire plan to your preferred 0 point. It doesn't matter where the 0 point is located. It can be maybe always in the left-hand lower corner or the right-hand, the upper corner. Wherever it might be, just know that that's where you're always gonna place it. Go ahead and do that in CAD. And then when you bring it into CET, it will populate right there at your 0 point. And then you're not searching and searching for half a mile worth of drawing space trying to find where that CAD landed. Now, I also have listed here dummy items, but let's face it, these are really tools, right, that you can use. But I call them dummy items because I'm talking about things that you probably aren't really thinking of as tools. Things like text boxes, labels, part tags, but even I would say like dimensions, notes that you want to be able to use on different things, elevation views, all those kinds of things that, again, you're using over and over again. But we're going to get into the why I highly recommend these dummy items here in 1 second. But one other thing I want to mention before I get there, creating custom view modes. So we talked about visibility settings and the paper spaces, but did you know that whatever visibility settings that you create in paper space, you can actually use in drawing space. In drawing space, they're called view modes, and you can populate them along the bottom of your screen. And the beauty of these is that you can then draw in those view modes, and you know exactly what your paper space is going to look like with those visibility settings applied. You'll know exactly where the dimension is going to land. If an IND tag is going to be blocking some other piece of information or not, if you need to move it. So back to those kind of dummy items though, those text lines, dimension, like all those things can have styles applied to them. By all means, go ahead and set up the styles, but don't just set them up. Go ahead and apply them to the text, the lines, and the dimensions. You know, especially when we're getting into things like installation drawings where you have electrical plans and panel plans, but then you also still need to have that plan view for the client to be able to, you know, do their final sign off on. We want to be able to separate all of those in our visibility settings and our view modes so that we can place them where we need to place them, have them show when we need them to show. So again, also create some of those custom categories if you need in order to ease all of that applying the different, we'll say, turning things off and on. Apply them to those dummy items, to those drawing tools, and then you can just copy and paste the dummy items. And I know I'm going to get some eye rolls. Oh man, copying and pasting dimensions and then trying to like reattach them to the thing that I'm, you know, but it's so complicated. Okay, here's my challenge to you. For those of you that know me, my mantra, yeah, fewer clicks, less scrolling. So here's my challenge to you. Is it fewer clicks to copy and paste a text or a dimension line and retype or re-snap to something new? Or are you going to have fewer clicks doing it from scratch and then having to go back and apply the styles, apply the custom categories, and oh wait, sometimes the custom categories, you forgot to take it off of something or add it to, maybe you have to have multiple custom categories on the same thing for it to show and all the things that you need to show, and you missed just one. And you know what? At least in my experience, that is always way, way, way more clicks. So until I'm proven otherwise, I stand by copy and paste. But here's another pro tip. Once you get all of these things set up, especially with those tools, I call them drawing tools, save those as favorites. Just like with your paper views, save them as favorites for use in older drawings because you'll find they're much easier to use. I almost guarantee it. Now, super efficiency. Do you have like one or two clients that have a ton of standard products that you're always using? Or maybe you don't have a standardized client, but maybe you just find yourself using the same product over and over again and just changing finishes or adding accessories, things like that. Now, go ahead and include some typicals in your template because, and I will tell you this, once you include a typical, you can set up part tagging. You can set up photo lab views and even settings for each one. You can block them so that it makes it easier for copying and pasting in other places in the floor plan. You can also use like product, like I'll say dummy product inside of a block. Then all you're having to do is just change it that one time. I will get into some examples when we get to the next step here. But also think about things like, schemes. Is there a client that, again, maybe they use the same product, but they have different finish schemes depending on location, floor, whatever it might be. You can also set up schemes for those and then have them kind of on standby for applying to all of their products that you have. So next up is we're going to get into making it our way in CET. Standing by, we're going to change over to CET here. Okay, here's my first example. And you'll see I have a couple of dialog boxes open because I want to be able to show you guys a few things. Now I do have it open in drawing space. And I know that I said, whenever you're building your template, start in paper space. Well, we're not building it. We're looking at one that's already created. And 9 times out of 10, at least in my experience, whenever we open up CET and we start a new project, we start in drawing space. So I'm going to treat this as if I'm opening this template up and I'm about to start using it. So drawing space it is. And this is what I mean by those drawing tools or dummy items. Dimensions and text. Here's text, it's for components. And you can also see, here's my old dealership. We had things set up. So here's, it's going to show up in my component install notes. Same with the panel. Now, if you do set up dimensions like we have here, I also highly recommend that you go ahead and set up both your single dimension and your chain dimension. Because again, in my opinion, it's way easier to edit those chain dimensions than it is to start from scratch, apply all of your styles and categorizations to it. And if you don't know how to edit chain dimensions, we need to talk. Maybe even check out my recording from last year's CET conference. But also go ahead and group things that work together to aid in your copying and pasting of it. I'm hitting A on my keyboard right now. But if I'm in single select, obviously it's not going to work as well. So maybe that's something also whenever you introduce a template, make sure you talk through with all of your coworkers who will be using this, how you have things set up to make sure that they understand kind of your thought process and how things can work better if they're in certain setting types. But again, here's electrical notes, including a quick legend for what all the different symbols typically kind of are used for. But then here's the symbols themselves ready to be copied and pasted. And I would say even the tagging, and you'll notice here, like we even have the tagging set up in categorizations. Now, we also included, again, a really quick legend so that everyone, again, is on the same page. Now, this would also always be, unless we get something from the A&D firm with different tagging, we would always match whatever the A&D firm sends us. But if they don't, then this is what we have to start with. And again, this is kind of hidden, I will say, but you can also use a data field for these. And I'll show you here in a second, though, why I recommend a data field for tagging. But you'll also see, even though I don't have anything populated in here yet, I still have my categorization set. And I also have my text style and everything else set just the same as the other ones. So I'm going to go over here into paper views really fast. This is also where you can have a couple of things. You'll see we have our install checklist for all the different things that we require, but we also have notes. Once everyone starts using the template, maybe the won't be needed as much. But for first-time users or new designers, this is something I do recommend. How is that space intended to be used? But also, go ahead and pin down everything that you want to be able to, or that you don't want people to be able to move around. So you'll see like there's a lot of information in here that's locked down. So that can all just stay the same. We also have all of our view clips have a whole bunch of those add-ons already applied to them. And here's one with a lot of those orange notes. how to use the blue rectangle here. And obviously you can resize it and copy it if need be. How do you mark electrical information when you're doing certain types of drawings? But we're also looking at notes. You can even include a note. Here, the scale is shown as the minimum scale, but you can change the scale if your project needs it. So putting in all of those notes to show what can be changed and kind of what the intent is for all of the consistency to happen and keep within your dealership. So I'm going to jump back over to my 2D though, and I'm going to say these drawing tools here is what I would kind of consider, like 90% of projects, especially if it's, all across, doesn't matter who the client is, if they have standards or not. I'm going to include this in any template that I create. But I'm going to zoom out here and show you that this is actually a template for a client with standardized, with standards in their furniture. So I have it set up here, typicals for seating, tables, and workstations. And you'll see all of my tagging in there. This is where this little dummy tag with nothing in it, if I double click on that, it's going to show up here as block name. So I've created blocks of all of these chairs, and I don't actually type in. It's based on my block name. It's one less thing that I have to type. But also, if that client decides that they want to change their standard, again, I only have to change it one time in order for it to take into effect here. Same thing with all of my tables. And I will also point out, you can do things like this where you include notes. Hey, I have this typical in here, but we need to confirm if they need all of these things added or deleted from their kind of, dummy typical here. And one other thing to note, our part tagging here. I also have part tagging started for all of these typicals. They're all applied so that whenever I start placing things into plan view or layout over here, then all of my tagging is already applied and I don't have to do it a second time. And when I open up my article views, you'll also see here, I already have something in here for my orderable specs. And that is showing, because I do have a lot of product in there, but these are all for my typicals. These are not going to be shown in my actual layout, so I don't want them included. So I went ahead and set up that orderable specs so that it will only cover what is in here. So you'll see way down here in tag 3, I actually have, here's my renderings. I'm going to go to view all so you can see. I have this all set up so that my renderings only show no pricing, but it's also set up so that I can very easily include, I already have a filter applied to this article view here so that those won't show up in my totals. So there you have it. I will say here's one other template. Now this is based on product. So it's not for a client, a specific client, but I find that I am almost always getting asked for one of these 3 setups with my product. So again, I have things set up here. Some things are blocked, but I don't have any finishes applied because, finishes are going to change per project. But I can very easily come in here and start applying different finishes depending on what's requested. But here's the other thing. Yes, I have, part tagging applied as well. And I also have some article views applied. I even have, and I'll show you this really fast, whenever I start populating my floor plan, I even already have a set discounting already inserted. So you can do that also with discounting and margins and whatnot. But here's the other beautiful thing. When I open up Photolab, where did it go? Oh, it's still loading. Here we go. I also already have everything shown here for what's going to show in my rendering. So everything is already set up for the renderings to take place. All I have to do is just hit render. I even have my naming already done, which obviously I can change. I just hit end, open up photo name, but I can change that if I want to, but I also already have it set up so that then when I come over here to my paper space, all I have to do is just say, hey, I want to use this one here, and I'm ready to go. So we're going to go back over here and say, are there, oops, let's change that. Are there any questions? Oh, this is not the way to do it. There we go. Are there any questions? Now I know this is a recording, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you for your time. Bye.